chicken's favorite motto is never shall the water stay clean. There will be poop everywhere. Get used to it. Chickens are some of the dumbest, smart creatures you will ever meet. They're literally mini dinosaurs who will eat anything and everything. All chickens do is peck, scratch, eat, and poop. And at some point, lay eggs. Hello, fellow homesteaders. Welcome to Mika's Homestead Talk, Chicken Edition. The journey to go from egg to egg is a long one. Now, what do I mean by egg to egg? From getting an egg, hatching it into a chick, or getting chicks, and raising that bird to lay their own eggs. These ladies are gonna be loud, so apologies. There is a ton to learn about how to raise your own chickens. The number one chunk of advice I can give you if you want to start raising chickens is to learn about the chickens. I see so many times people who get birds and they know nothing about them. Learn the bird. And most of all, start with their anatomy. Understand their mouth system, their gut system, their digestive system, their reproductive system, the whole shebang. Learn about all of it, as well as learn about their developmental stages. Learn about how long it takes for them to even get to the age of egg laying. Learn about how long it takes them to lay the egg, but also how many eggs they're going to lay in their lifetime. Also understand that chickens can live relatively long lives. I have an 8-year-old birdie running around in here, as well as understanding things like their diets. Now there may some people may disagree with what I'm about to say. Settle down back there. But that's okay, because we're all going to do things a little differently based on what we know, what we've read, learned, and our experiences. But for me, my chickens' diets are as variety-filled as possible. You'll Google and you'll get a list that says chickens cannot eat X, Y, and Z. And there's a couple things like sugary stuff and chocolate that I totally dig and understand. I really try to avoid any chocolatey, sugary things for my birds. But my birds get onions, tomatoes, potatoes. Most of the things that are on the no-go list, my birds get. At least a little bit in small amounts, because for the most part, those things are not going to hurt them to eat a little. It's when they eat a lot at a time or a lot over time. So it's not like they get potatoes all the time. But if I make some potatoes and it goes in the kitchen scrap bin, they're gonna get those bits of potatoes. And I've never had any troubles. I got a bunch of happy, healthy, very shiny birdies. I also feed them a lot of meats. For the most part, it is raw meat because they are omnivores. Because they literally eat anything. Mice, bugs, snakes, sometimes each other. But I have found the more variety you have in a chicken's diet, the more delicious their eggs seem, the more healthy they seem, and just the more happy and vibrant and overall they seem to be. And along with learning about their diets, you gotta learn how to keep your birds healthy. And just like humans, making sure they're getting plenty of food, plenty of water, plenty of outside sun time, their space and their coops are kept clean, usually eliminates most problems you may encounter. You're so loud. I'm trying to take a video. Maybe a video with the chickens wasn't the best idea. But there are many other things you can do to help keep your birds healthy. And for me, being a person who really doesn't like to medicate unless absolutely necessary, which has been very, very far and few between, I do a lot of kind of the herbal remedies type of medicinal value herbalism with my chickens. But for me, it's not using herbal things as the treatment, it's the preventative. So doing things like giving them lots of herbs like oregano, thyme, chili peppers, and things like that, it helps to boost their immunity. Just like people, if we add good stuff into our systems, it helps us fight all the bad stuff. So for me, it's about a constant input of good stuff, which usually makes it, even when they do get sick, they don't get super sick. They're able to fight it off and be just fine and not lose birds due to an illness. And I do have a method that when my birds do get sick, I let it run its course through the flock, and I'll actually take those eggs that they have laid, like right when they're getting over being sick, and I will actually hatch out those eggs, with the hopes of, like nature does, to increase the immunity of their genetic pool within my flock. And through the years of kind of doing that herbal preventative, hatching eggs after they're sick method of raising my birds really don't get sick. And if they do, it goes through the flock very quick and painlessly. Like, it's not like the whole flock is sick and I lose birds. They're sick for just a couple of days maybe, and then it's all over and done with. And speaking of hatching eggs, if you didn't know, it takes 21 days for an egg to develop into a chick to hatch. You can either use the natural incubator, that is the bird, or you can buy or build your own incubator. As well as, if you're lucky, any bird will hatch any egg. You can put duck eggs under a chicken and chicken eggs under a duck, or give a turkey chicken and duck eggs, and the birds will hatch them out, and you'll be able to have cute little mixed families of birdies. And that is usually how I increase my flock numbers, is hatching my birds' eggs. Sometimes I'll go to one of the Tractor Supply stores to get some new birds and kind of new blood into the flock, but I much prefer getting eggs from other people who have a mixed flock of their own and just hatch out their barnyard mixes to hatch into my flock, because I like having mixed birds much more than I like having full breeds. It's much like, you know, certain dog breeds have certain health issues. I found it's kind of similar with chickens, that certain chickens have certain traits and certain health issues that are more prominent. And as I have bred all my birdies and have my own little Franken chickens, I have found they are much sturdier, much healthier, and just way more resilient than birds that I buy from, say, a Tractor Supply store. And it's always hard to know exactly how many chickens you will want or need for whatever kind of production you're looking for. Because for us, not only is it eggs, but it's also meat. And not meat for just us humans, but also for the dogs and the cats. So when I hatch out my birds, it tends to be the roosters go for eating and the hens are for laying. And I only harvest a bird for eating as needed. I very rarely harvest more than one bird at a time. And this is because we really don't eat that much meat. So it's only kind of when we're wanting some chicken or something like that that I would harvest a bird. Or if I had a super overabundance of roosters, I may harvest more than one to feed the animals or to feed us, but it's kind of only when I have an overabundance, more than one would be harvested at a time. And that includes for the animals, the cats and the dogs. I really only harvest as needed. But if you don't want to end up harvesting any of your birds, it's definitely coming to the understanding that they live decently long lives, as well as sooner or later... You're so loud! Is that sooner or later their egg production will slow down. Being in here is causing all kinds of ruckus for some reason. And so the fact that not only do birds have a long lifespan, but they also will slow down in egg production, you do have to decide kind of your system of how you want to do things. Because depending on your situation, if you're relying on them for eggs, it costs money to keep them healthy, to lay eggs. What do you do with birds that aren't laying eggs anymore? What are you talking about? Which is totally fine if you want to just keep them as a pet, but again, it does cost money. So depending on people's different wants, needs, morals, values, situations, some people do cycle out their birds and kind of have a continual, each year they get new birds in to replace the old birds. Just talking smack? Wasn't expecting it to be so darn loud. So figuring out your system of how you want to kind of deal and work with your birds is going to have to be something that you kind of find through experiment and experience and just kind of figuring out what works for you. Whether you want to keep these birds till they're old, if you are able to harvest them or have someone else harvest them for you. As well as there is the factor that the older the bird, the tougher the meat. But if you're a person who really likes making bone broth, an older hen actually is way more denser in nutrients when making bone broth. So that is something in the sense with my older birds. They're great moms too. So the older birds can hang around for a long time before or if they do get harvested, because they can make for good moms, but they also make for a really good nutrient dense bone broth. And for my health and stuff, bone broths are very important to me. So that is one reason I do keep my birds around as long as I can until they're needed to be nutritional value to somebody else. Hi, honey. What are you doing? What are you doing? And not all birds are going to be this friendly. It can take a lot of time, work, and effort to get friendly birds and to keep them friendly birds. Especially with roosters. Roosters can be very temperamental. And for me, in my experience, because we've bred out broodiness, the desire to be a mom, we've bred that out of chickens, because when they brood, they stop laying eggs. So we've bred the broodiness out, so we have more or a higher egg production. And in my the way I've deduced it, one of the reasons roosters tend to be such jerks is because we've taken that maternal instinct out of the hens, and in that same aspect we've ramped up the buttholery in roosters. And since I want to be able to have hens that are broody more often than not, sort of, I actually bred Silky, which are these little fuzzy cotton ball chickens that tend to be super, super broody. I have bred that into my flock to kind of reactivate that maternal instinct within my chickens, and I have found it has really mellowed out my roosters. So it's really not often that I get a turd of a rooster, and they tend to be way more sweeter to the hens. They have way better kind of the mating, dancing ritual kind of aspect to them. And so I find and think that the genetic alterations through breeding we have done is one reason that roosters are such jerks and why mama hens are such bad mama hens. But when you bring it back in some of those natural instincts, you actually kind of rebalance them out. You get better mama hens and you get nicer roosters. So the learning curve of how to work and deal and have friendly chickens is definitely a journey of not only learning how to interact with your birds and holding and loving them often kind of deal to have real friendly birds. It's not always easy, and not all breeds are going to be as friendly as other breeds. And this breed here is one of my Franken mutts. So like I can't even tell you what this bird is mixed with all the way. Her dad was a naked neck. Don't you peck my face? Don't you peck my face? But her dad was a naked neck. She's got black copper Moran. There's Silky, there's Australorp, there's Buff Orpington. There's who knows what else is in this bird. But I have found that these mutt birds are the sweetest birds. They are great producers, and they just have a better overall attitude about them. The social structure, like when it comes to the pecking order, doesn't seem to be quite as intense. As well as over time, I've raised almost all my chickens with little chicks because I do what is called a perpetual hatch through stack hatching, where I stack a bunch of eggs that were put into an incubator at different days. So for a couple of months, I can have several hatches within a week. So I have different birds of a bunch of different ages growing up together that get introduced to the flock, and so they're always used to having smaller chicks around. So I don't really have to worry about adding new chickens that are at least of a smaller size. Like, of course, there's still a meet and greet point where everybody has to meet each other and greet, but I don't have to worry due to the pecking order, smaller chickens being harmed, because all my chickens are used to having little chickens around. But there's still a pecking order and it's still actively used. You just sit there all day? She doesn't really feel like moving, so we'll see how long she just wants to sit in my hand. Oh, pretty girl. And there are other things to consider when getting chickens, is not only where, how, why you want chickens, but it's also remembering that, you know, chickens do need some space, not only to kind of walk around, but also in their coop. You don't want them to be too cramped, but it doesn't have to be a huge space at the same time. And there are many ways to kind of raise the chickens, whether you raise them in a coop, you can raise them where they have a big run. You can do free ranging, which is essentially they just run out and about as they desire, and they kind of come in at night, because chickens will put themselves to bed at night. So I never have to put them in there. They put themselves in there, and then I have to just make sure I remember to close the door and open it in the morning. It's the worst thing when you're like in bed all comfy, ready to zonk out for the night, and you can't remember if you closed the coop door. And whether you're pretty sure you did or not, you'll go out and check and make sure you did. And then remembering to open it in the morning. Sometimes I forget for a minute, but they never really seem to mind too much. Flew right over there, huh? And sometimes you get escape artists, like this little miss here just decided to clear the fence. And so she is one that I need to remember to clip her wings. And it's only, if you're gonna clip wings, you only clip one wing so they can't get lift to fly. So don't be clipping both, just one. But that is the other thing, is sometimes you can build a coop that is totally inescapable and you will still have a hendini on your hands and she will find a way to escape. There's so many things to talk about. I'm trying to think of what else to say. So I was talking about kind of the, you know, keeping them safe, enclosed, predator-proof. I will say that you can have like the most predator-proof coop, but if a bear wants in, they're getting in, kind of idea. So for me, I think of it more as predator resistant. You want to make sure it's just harder for predators to get in. And the harder you make it, the less likely you are to lose any birds. But for me personally, I lose way less animals to nature than I do to people's dogs. People and their dogs can be your worst enemy if you have chickens. And that can actually include your own dogs. And for us, it was kind of a dual thing when it came to other people's dogs and our dogs. Our dogs were raised in the chicken coop essentially with all the goats and the chickens, and were totally awesome with our animals for a long time, until we had a pack of other people's dogs come onto our property and start killing our animals. And our dogs decided to kind of join in after a moment, and they realized how awesome it was to play with chickens, and so they can't be trusted with our chickens anymore. And I understand a lot of people say, oh, training, oh this, oh that. It doesn't always work. We have done everything under the sun, and we still have a dog who, if a chicken gets within range and you're not watching him, he will eat the chicken. I'm glad that he at least eats the chicken. He doesn't just do it for sport. So I definitely give him props for that, because most other people's dogs will take out your whole flock and won't eat a single one. Versus coyotes are gonna eat it. A bobcat's gonna eat it. A hawk is gonna eat it. Nature at least eats what it kills. People's dogs do not. So if you live somewhere with other people's dogs, just keep, however you can, do your best to keep them out of your yard. Keep your chickens from being able to get out of the yard. Because for me, in my experience, it is people's dogs are the worst predator enemy. And so when it comes to protecting your flock, it can be tricky, because our dog who likes to get a chicken, he can scale an 8-foot fence. We've had camera footage of this dog Spider-Manning his little bum up a fence so he could get a duck that was in the garden space. So it can be really hard to absolutely predator proof, because predators aren't just nature, it's also domesticated animals. And for me personally, like I said, I'd rather feed some of the wildlife nature than, just lose chickens to people's dogs. So for me, it's kind of finding a balance between it's okay to lose a couple chickens to nature. It happens. I'm not going to be upset kind of thing. But it's also, you don't want to lose your birds to any sorts of animals. So we are here most of the time. I come out to my birds all the time during the day. The dogs, they are rotated with the chickens within their space. So they are always around or running around with us because like the dogs run around with us during the day, and they are on their leads for the night so they can sit and protect the flock, because that is what they were meant to do. They just don't do it quite right anymore. But we do our best to work with the dogs and work with the chickens and try to keep the peace and keep any losses at a minimum. And that is the hard thing, is sometimes animals together just don't work together. We have cats that sleep within the coop, even if I have chicks. Our cats know that you don't eat a chicken's chick. And our dogs at one point knew not to eat the chickens, but like I said, we have some lovely camera footage of watching a whole fiasco, and since the big fiasco, they just can't be trusted. And that's definitely the number one thing, is never trust your dog unless it is a true livestock guardian dog that has been brought up and trained proper. Do not trust them around your animals. Just don't. It's not worth the risk. Okay, so now kind of like the bummer side of that part of kind of predators and chickens. It's pretty much up to us to be able to raise our birds how we see fit, and we're all gonna see that very different depending on our values, because some people really do not like that I eat my chickens, and some people are all for it. And either way, I get it and I understand, but for us, there's no way we could grow enough vegetables to supply ourselves with all our nutritional needs. We cannot do that. Maybe one day. So that just means the less meat we would need to eat, because I'd rather have a chicken that lay eggs all the time kind of thing than, I'd rather not harvest animals to eat to a degree. But me and my system, my biology, my personal preferences in a sense is I do need some meat in my diet, but it's not a ton. And so that's how we raise our animals, is we don't raise a ton of animals to have a ton of meat. We raise animals so they can help us revitalize the land, feed us to a degree, but also feed our dogs and our cats, because dogs and cats are not technically supposed to eat dried kibble. They're supposed to be eating meat and some vegetables. So that's what we want to provide to them. And that's how we feel about ourselves. We're supposed to eat mostly vegetables, but a little bit of meat in our diet is, to me, in my opinion, is what we're supposed to do. We're always looking at nature. Nature is our biggest inspiration for how we do things. And if you look at nature, even herbivores at certain times will seek out meat to eat, because there is something in that meat that they need. And that's also how I raise my chickens. I look at how nature does it and I try to mimic those aspects. Chickens like to peck and scratch, so they need space to peck and scratch, and that's why we rotationally graze them, as though they can peck and scratch but not decimate the area they are in. Even though the areas are pretty decimated, we don't want to make it worse. But they also need lots of sunshine, just like nature. And they also eat plants and bugs, and they're great at getting, they're good at taking out mice and other pests and that kind of thing. So sometimes I'll let some little ones run around in the garden to eat some bugs that may be in the garden, but very carefully, because they will scratch things up quicker than you can blink. And it is always wonderful to have a mixed flock when it comes to different types of birds. Like having turkeys and ducks and chickens and guineas all together can be great, but issues can happen. I myself have kind of learned that you got to be careful with turkeys and chickens, especially if you have a male turkey. He will stand on your female hens and he could squish them. And I have found that out the hard way through experience. You got to be careful with ducks and chickens as well, because if you're not aware of duck anatomy, so if you're going to get ducks, make sure you check out duck anatomy, because male duck parts are shaped like a corkscrew, and chickens do not actually do any dirty deeds. They just kind of kiss bums, and that is the breeding process. And ducks actually kind of do the deed. And so a duck with his corkscrew shaped part can actually harm your hen, because hens are not built to receive any such male part, especially from a duck. So you do have to make sure you know how certain animals actually interact and what damage they can cause each other through things like breeding, because in a general sense, boys are gonna be boys and they're gonna want any lady. So whether it's a duck and you got chickens and turkeys, it can be a fiasco and it can cause damage to your birds. So it's also making sure that if you have a male turkey, that he has plenty of ladies. If you have a male duck, make sure he has plenty of ladies. And just to always be watching out and making sure that the boys aren't trying to get the roosters, you know, the boy ducks aren't trying to get the roosters girls, and the tom turkey isn't trying to steal the ducks ladies or something to that effect, because you want your birds to be safe. And even though they get along, the mating process between species can be super damaging. So always be aware and think of that, and if needed, they have separate spaces to avoid those issues. But I myself do love having a mixed flock, so I do tend to only keep girls together. And still with turkeys, even girl turkeys, they can just be kind of mean, so still watch out. But usually if you have all girls together and there's no male kind of dominance for ladies' attentions and affections, there's very few issues. And I'm really trying to think of anything else that I need to cover about chickens, because I've been talking about chickens for a minute and there's still so much more to cover. But those are just kind of my first initial thoughts and things to think about. If you just got chickens, if you're thinking about getting chickens, there's a lot to know, there's a lot to learn, there's a lot to understand within their social constructs. So if you get chickens and have chickens or are in the process or something to that effect, watch your birds, take time with your birds, and most of all, learn their anatomy and learn how their guts work, their systems work, and as well as learn how to, I guess something I really did kind of miss is understand what sicknesses look like and how to treat them. Because to me, and what I have seen is, oh, my chicken is sick, and everybody says she's egg bound, when that's not even close to what it is. So make sure that you're reading up on illnesses, how to prevent those illnesses is most important, but also how to treat and deal with those illnesses. Because to me, the biggest treatment for an illness is the prevention of those illnesses. But sometimes they're going to happen, whether it is from nature bringing it in, you brought in new birds that may have been sick. So make sure you're always quarantining new birds for up to a month to make sure that they're healthy before putting them in with your flock. Being really aware of what they're eating in the sense of if there's something that's poisonous that is native, making sure they're getting a nice variety in their diet, lots of herbs and some veggies and some meat, as well as their scratch grains and their main layer flock feed. Just so much more to learn and tell. But I definitely think this should be the end of at least part 1 to the chicken homestead talk. Because here soon I will be putting eggs into the incubator, and that is a whole other gloriousness of stuff to learn about to hatch your own eggs. And so once I get to that point where I got some eggs in the incubator, I'll be talking on, about more chickens, how to incubate, fertility of your eggs, dealing with roosters and making sure they're doing their job, and there's so much. Chickens may seem so simple, but they're actually super complicated. They're, like I said, they're the dumbest, smartest things, and they're the simplest, most complicated things, and there's so much to know and so much to learn. But as I like to say, you're not going to know how to do something until you do it. You can do all the reading and all the research, and it's only until you get hands-on that you're actually going to know and learn and figure out how to do it and how you want to do it. So with spring being in the air and everybody getting chicks, especially with the whole egg fiasco, there's a lot to know and learn about birds. Don't make a rash and uneducated decision when you get chickens. Make sure you at least got the basics under your belt before you get your birdies. But I really do hope that even if you know nothing about birds, you learn about birds so you can get some, because they are a fabulous creature to have on Homestead. She totally tried to perch on my camera right as I said that. It was just perfect. That is chicken life wrapped in a bow. And with that bow, happy chickens. Peace.